It's unsettling how easily we can forget that we share our spaces with creatures far more powerful than ourselves. Back in 2016, I remember reading reports about increased mountain lion activity near residential areas in Boulder, Colorado. A severe drought was forcing these magnificent but dangerous animals to search for water closer to where people lived. It was a reminder that nature doesn't always respect our boundaries. Today, I want to recount some truly horrifying animal encounters that came to light during our investigations on Animal Quest in 2025. These are some of the most intense moments we've ever documented. Let's start with a chilling case from that October of 2016. The affluent neighborhood of Wildwood Heights in Boulder, Colorado, was still quiet in the early morning darkness. This upscale community, built just 5 years prior, sat right on the edge of the Rocky Mountain foothills, with winding streets and modern homes backing onto open space. Wildlife corridors, really. Lisa Hartwell, a 33-year-old marketing coordinator, had a routine: a 5 a.m. jog through the neighborhood. She'd moved to Wildwood Heights for that promise of mountain living combined with urban convenience. A dedicated fitness enthusiast, she kept a strict schedule, often rising before dawn to get her run in before work. It was her sacred time to clear her mind and enjoy the crisp mountain air. That autumn was unusually dry, with drought conditions lingering. Local wildlife officials had issued warnings about increased animal activity, explaining that deer, elk, and their predators were being forced closer to human settlements in search of water. Several residents had reported mountain lion sightings, tracks in backyards, a large cat spotted near the retention pond. Lisa had heard the warnings, but dismissed them as typical mountain living concerns. She continued her runs, confident that her familiar streets were safe. Mountain lions, also known as cougars or pumas, are North America's second largest wildcat species. Adult males can weigh between 115 and 220 pounds. They're perfectly adapted for hunting in mountainous terrain, possessing incredible stealth, speed, and jumping ability. I've read they can leap vertically up to 15 feet and horizontally up to 45. They're primarily ambush hunters, relying on surprise attacks, typically targeting the neck and spine of their prey for a quick, fatal bite. On that particular morning, Lisa was jogging through the pre-dawn darkness, unaware that a 140-pound male mountain lion had been stalking a mule deer through a drainage culvert beneath the street. Lisa's approach disrupted the hunt, startling both the deer and the mountain lion. The deer bolted across the street, disappearing into the darkness, leaving the frustrated predator crouched in the shadows of the concrete opening. The attack was sudden. As Lisa passed within 10 feet of the culvert, the mountain lion exploded from the shadows with incredible speed, covering the distance in a single leap. His massive front paws struck her between the shoulder blades with devastating force, sending her crashing face first onto the asphalt. Her attempts to scream were cut short as the mountain lion's powerful jaws clamped down on the back of her neck. His 4-inch canine teeth pierced through muscle and vertebrae with crushing force. The mountain lion's razor-sharp claws raked across Lisa's back and shoulders, opening deep gashes that severed major blood vessels and caused massive tissue damage. The 140-pound cat used his strength to drag Lisa's body across the asphalt and down into the concrete culvert, where the darkness would provide protection while he fed. Lisa's body was recovered 3 hours later by a joint team of police officers and Colorado Parks and wildlife personnel. The mountain lion had abandoned his kill when the search teams approached, retreating further into the drainage network. Lisa had died from massive trauma to her neck and spine. The mountain lion's killing bite had been instantly fatal. The investigation revealed that Lisa had inadvertently interrupted the mountain lion's hunt, triggering the attack. The mountain lion was tracked and euthanized the following day after being located in the foothills above the neighborhood. Then, on August 19, 2017, Felicity Grant arrived at Boulder County Open Space in Colorado. It's a vast wilderness area known for its rugged terrain and diverse wildlife. The mountainous region stretches across thousands of acres of dense forest and winding trails, attracting outdoor enthusiasts. But these same wilderness areas also serve as prime habitat for mountain lions and other dangerous predators. Felicity Grant, a 39-year-old fitness influencer from Denver with over 5,000 social media followers, had planned what she called her ultimate wilderness transformation experience. She was known for her entitled attitude and belief that her athletic superiority made her exempt from rules. She had already caused multiple confrontations at the park entrance, berating the teenage park attendant for suggesting she read safety guidelines, claiming someone of her fitness level didn't need advice from minimum wage employees. Park Ranger Tom Bradley had attempted to brief Felicity on recent mountain lion activity during her permit application process. The area had experienced multiple cougar sightings over the previous month, including aggressive encounters that resulted in temporary trail close. Felicity became increasingly hostile, interrupting Tom repeatedly. "I've always found it haunting how easily the wild can reclaim us." Consider the story of Felicity, an influencer who chose the Rabbit Ears Pass Trail for a dawn run, ignoring all the kilo signs. She believed they didn't apply to elite athletes like herself. She even tore down warning notices, declaring that taxpayers like her had every right to use public trails. But the mountains don't care about status. Felicity's arrogance would prove fatal. Fellow hiker Maria Santos had tried to warn her about solo hiking at dawn, but Felicity dismissed her concerns with cruel words, suggesting Maria was just a jealous local trying to sabotage a successful influencer. On the morning of her run, Felicity started at 5:30 a.m., deliberately choosing the pre-dawn hours to avoid other hikers she considered inferior. She wore noise-cancelling headphones, blasting loud electronic music, and carried a backpack filled with raw steaks for her post-workout meal. Unbeknownst to her, a 140-pound male mountain lion had been actively hunting in the area, establishing a territory that included the Rabbit Ears Pass Trail. These creatures are apex predators, perfectly adapted for hunting in mountainous terrain, with powerful hind legs that can propel them 40 feet in a single leap, and retractable claws up to 4 inches long. The combination of Felicity's erratic running pattern, heavy breathing, and the scent of fresh meat created the perfect conditions to attract the predator. The mountain lion detected the scent of meat from over a mile away and began tracking her. The cougar stalked Felicity along the ridge above the trail, using rocks and trees to remain hidden. As she rounded a sharp bend, the mountain lion positioned itself on a large boulder about 15 feet above the path. Completely unaware due to her loud music and the arrogant belief that her fitness made her invulnerable, Felicity passed below the boulder. The mountain lion launched itself in a devastating aerial attack, striking her from behind with tremendous force. The predator's hind claws raked down her back, while its front paws wrapped around her shoulders and neck. The lion's 4-inch canine teeth immediately found their target, clamping down on the back of Felicity's neck with surgical precision. These animals kill their prey through a specific technique that targets the cervical vertebrae. The mountain lion executed the attack with deadly efficiency. Its powerful jaws applied crushing press directly to Felicity's spinal cord, severing the connection between her brain and body instantly. The bite penetrated deep into the neck muscles and fractured the vertebrae, causing immediate paralysis from the neck down. The cougar maintained its grip on Felicity's neck while using its powerful claws to secure its position, its hind legs continuing to rake down her spine and legs, opening deep wounds that bled profusely. Within 2 minutes, Felicity died from a combination of spinal cord severance, massive blood loss, and suffocation caused by the crushing press on her neck and throat. The mountain lion then began dragging her body off the main trail toward a secluded area where it could feed undisturbed. Felicity's body was discovered 3 days later by a search and rescue team. The location and condition of the remains were consistent with a mountain lion attack and subsequent caching behavior. Sometimes I find myself wondering about the animals in shelters, the ones deemed too dangerous. On December 3, 2014, Jennifer Walsh, a 25-year-old veterinary student, found herself moving between the kennels at the county animal shelter. Fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows, but she was determined to believe that every animal deserved a second chance. As a weekend volunteer, Jennifer had developed a reputation for advocating for the shelter's most difficult cases, gravitating toward the aggressive ones. Animals marked with red cards indicating immediate euthanization. The dog that would cost Jennifer her life was Diesel, a 75-pound pit bull with a scarred muzzle and eyes that seemed to hold years of rage. He'd been surrendered after multiple bite incidents, including an attack on a neighbor's child requiring emergency surgery. The behavioral assessment was decisive. Too dangerous for adoption. Scheduled for euthanization, Jennifer had been watching Diesel for 3 days, looking for signs of the gentle soul she believed existed beneath his aggressive exterior. She'd seen him pace restlessly, heard him growl at anyone who approached, watched him destroy every toy placed in his cage. But she'd also noticed what she interpreted as vulnerability, moments when he pressed against the back wall, briefly softening when he thought no one was watching. The shelter's protocol was clear. Dogs like Diesel were never to be handled alone. Staff with years of experience and proper equipment were required for any interaction with red card animals. But Jennifer had convinced herself that Diesel's aggression was fear-based, that what he needed was one-on-one attention. On that December afternoon, with most staff busy and senior volunteers handling other duties, Jennifer made the decision that would cost her her life. She approached Diesel. I often think about the story of Jennifer, the young woman whose dream of becoming a veterinarian ended in such a horrifying way. It serves as a stark reminder that good intentions aren't enough. That academic knowledge, however vast, can't replace experience and respect for safety protocols. I've read the investigation reports, and the details are chilling. Jennifer had gone to Diesel's kennel with a slip lead and the key to the isolation room, a small, windowless space used for behavioral evaluations. Diesel's reaction was immediate. Lips pulled back, yellowed teeth bared, hackles raised, a low growl rumbling from his chest. Danger screamed from every aspect of his body language. Jennifer, tragically, interpreted these signs as fear, not aggression. The moment the kennel door opened, Diesel's demeanor shifted, becoming almost calculating. He seemed to assess Jennifer's position, and this brief hesitation gave her the false confidence to slip the lead around his neck and guide him toward the isolation room. Once inside, she closed the door and removed the lead, believing freedom of movement would help him relax. The room was small, just 8 by 10 feet, with concrete walls and nothing but a metal folding chair. It was designed for safety, but it also meant there was nowhere to run. For several minutes, Diesel stood rigid in the center, his eyes never leaving Jennifer's face. She sat in the chair and began talking to him, her voice gentle and encouraging, completely unaware that she was being evaluated by a predator. The attack came when Jennifer stood and took a step toward Diesel, her hand extended in what she intended as a peaceful gesture. To Diesel, that movement represented a threat demanding immediate action. His 75 pounds launched across the room with explosive force, his jaws targeting Jennifer's throat with precision. Her scream was cut short as Diesel's teeth sank deep into her neck, crushing her windpipe and severing major blood vessels in a single bite. His jaws locked onto their target with mechanical efficiency. Jennifer's hands clawed desperately at the dog's head. But Diesel had been bred for combat. His grip was unbreakable once engaged. The dog's powerful neck muscles allowed him to shake violently, tearing through tissue and bone while maintaining his hold. Blood sprayed across the concrete walls as Jennifer's struggles grew weaker, her body going into shock from the massive trauma. The attack was swift, brutal, and utterly without mercy. Other volunteers, hearing Jennifer's initial scream, rushed toward the isolation room, but the heavy door was locked from the inside. By the time they could locate the key and safely enter, Jennifer lay motionless on the concrete floor, her life ebbing away in a pool of blood. Diesel stood over her body, his muzzle stained red, his eyes still burning with the same aggressive intensity that had marked him for euthanization. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but Jennifer's injuries were beyond medical intervention. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Diesel was immediately sedated and euthanized. His death was as swift and clinical as the attack that preceded it. The investigation that followed was thorough but predictable. Jennifer had violated multiple safety protocols, ignored clear warning signs, and placed herself in a situation that experienced professionals would have avoided. The shelter implemented new security measures, including electronic locks on isolation rooms and mandatory buddy systems for all volunteer activities. Jennifer's death became a cautionary tale in veterinary schools across the country. Her family established a scholarship in her name, but requested that it go to students studying wildlife conservation rather than domestic animal care. It was a final acknowledgement that some animals, no matter how much love they're shown, remain fundamentally dangerous. Not long after that tragedy, on April 17, 2018, the humid Florida air hung heavy over the grounds of Sunshine Primate Sanctuary. It was a controversial facility that claimed to rescue primates while, in reality, exploiting them for tourist photographs. The 20-acre property housed over 30 primates in substandard conditions, generating revenue through photo sessions that legitimate sanctuaries would never permit. The afternoon sun beat down on concrete encloses where gorillas, chimpanzees, and other primates paced restlessly behind inadequate barriers. Jessica Rodriguez, a 31-year-old veterinary technician from Tampa, had visited the facility with her husband, Carlos, as part of what she believed was a legitimate conservation effort. Jessica had always been passionate about animal welfare, taking photos of animals throughout her career to document their care and recovery. Her genuine love for animals had driven her to pursue veterinary technology training, working nights to support herself through school. She had dedicated her career to animal welfare, earning her veterinary technology degree through years of hard work and sacrifice. Her passion for primate conservation had led her to volunteer at legitimate sanctuaries and support organizations working to protect great apes in the wild. Jessica genuinely believed that her visit to Sunshine Primate Sanctuary would help promote conservation efforts through the photo she planned to take. That afternoon, Jessica was participating in what the facility marketed as an educational encounter with King, a 350-pound silverback gorilla who had been acquired from a defunct research facility. The sanctuary's minimal safety measures consisted of a chain-link barrier that separated visitors from the gorilla's enclosure, with no additional protection or supervision from qualified staff. Silverback gorillas are among the most powerful primates on Earth. With adult males weighing up to 400 pounds and possessing the strength of 10 grown men, these magnificent animals are highly intelligent and emotionally complex. But they're also territorial and can become extremely aggressive when they perceive threats to their domain. The power of a gorilla is almost unfathomable. They can communicate through complex body language, and their behavior can shift from calm to violent in an instant. I've read accounts of their massive hands gripping with crushing force. Their powerful jaws hold canine teeth sharp enough to inflict severe wounds. I remember reading about a woman named Jessica who approached a gorilla enclosure with her camera. She hoped to capture images that would convey the animal's intelligence and emotional depth. The gorilla, named King, appeared calm. He sat near the fence, his massive frame relaxed as he observed the human visitors with apparent curiosity. Jessica began photographing him, excited about the conservation message she could share through these portraits. But then she decided to reach through the fence thinking physical contact would create a more powerful image for her advocacy. She'd observed King's calm demeanor and mistook it for friendliness, not realizing it was the calculated patience of a territorial animal assessing potential threats. King's reaction was instantaneous and devastating. The moment Jessica's hand passed through the barrier, the 350-pound silverback grabbed her arm with crushing strength and pulled her against the chain-link fencing. Jessica's scream of shock and pain filled the facility as King's grip tightened. Carlos and other visitors tried to free her, but the gorilla's strength was far beyond human capability. King's massive hand maintained its crushing grip on Jessica's arm, while his other hand reached through the barrier to grab her head and shoulders, pulling her harder against the inadequate fencing. The silverback's territorial instincts drove him to continue the assault. His powerful hands inflicted devastating trauma to Jessica's head, neck, and arms, while she remained trapped. Her attempts to break free only seemed to increase King's aggressive behavior, as he interpreted her struggles as continued threats to his territory. Jessica's movements grew weaker as massive blood loss and crushing injuries overwhelmed her body. King's grip never loosened as he continued to pull her against the barrier. His territorial fury focused entirely on eliminating what he perceived as an intrusion into his domain. Within minutes, Jessica's struggle ceased. The massive gorilla maintained his grip on her lifeless form, while displaying threatening behavior toward anyone who approached the enclave. Emergency responders arrived with tranquilizer equipment, but Jessica was already dead. The investigation revealed that the Sunshine Primate Sanctuary had been operating as an illegal roadside zoo, exploiting both animals and visitors for profit, while providing inadequate safety measures and animal care. The facility was immediately raided and shut down by state authorities, with all primates relocated to legitimate sanctuaries. King was transferred to an accredited facility with proper containment and enrichment programs, where he could live out his remaining years in conditions appropriate for his species. Jessica's death prompted enhanced regulations for facilities claiming to operate as animal sanctuaries and stricter enforcement of existing wildlife protection laws. Her family established a foundation supporting legitimate primate conservation efforts, ensuring that her genuine passion for animal welfare would continue through organizations that truly protected great apes rather than exploiting them for profit. It was March 18th, 2017. In the upscale Asheville, North Carolina neighborhood of Mountain View Estates, the first warm evening of spring was settling in. The residential development, built on the slopes of the Blue Ridge Mountains, featured large lots with mature trees and natural landscaping that blended seamlessly with the surrounding forest. Maria Santos, a 41-year-old single mother and part-time dog walker, was making her evening rounds through the neighborhood's winding streets, caring for the pets of wealthy residents who relied on her services. Maria had been working as a professional dog walker for 3 years, building a loyal clientele among Mountain View Estates' affluent homeowners. They appreciated her reliability and genuine love of animals. She often walked multiple dogs simultaneously, managing up to 6 animals at once while maintaining perfect control and ensuring each pet received individual attention. Maria's income from dog walking helped supplement her day job at a local veterinary clinic, allowing her to support her teenage daughter as a single parent. The Mountain View Estates development had been carved out of pristine mountain forest, with builders required to preserve mature trees and maintain natural wildlife corridors throughout the community. Recent construction of additional homes had disrupted established animal movement patterns, forcing bears, deer, and other wildlife to seek new routes through residential areas. The North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission had issued warnings about increased bear activity in mountain communities, particularly as animals emerged from winter hibernation. Maria was aware of the wildlife warnings, but had never encountered any dangerous animals during her 3 years of walking dogs in the neighborhood. She carried pepper spray as a precaution and had received training on wildlife encounters from the local animal control office. On this particular evening, she was walking 3 large dogs, 2 German Shepherds and a Golden Retriever, along the community's main street when she noticed unusual activity near a row of garbage cans. Black bears are North America's most common bear species, with adult females typically weighing between 200 and 400 pounds. Mother bears with cubs are extremely protective and will attack any perceived threat to their offspring. I've seen what bears can do when they're surprised, when they're cornered. They can run faster than I ever could, possess the strength to break down doors, overturn cars. And those claws, those teeth, they can inflict devastating injuries. I remember reading about Maria. As she walked her dogs one morning, she came across a 300-pound black bear with 2 cubs rummaging through garbage cans. She knew the danger immediately and started backing away slowly. But her dogs, agitated, began barking aggressively. The mother bear's protective instincts kicked in. She rose to her full height, vocalizing aggressively, positioning herself between the dogs and her cubs. Maria tried to control the dogs and retreat, but their barking only escalated the situation. The bear charged, covering those 30 yards in seconds. Maria, tangled in the leashes, fell hard onto the asphalt. The dogs scattered, leaving her vulnerable. The bear's paws struck her back and shoulders with bone-crushing force. Her jaws clamped down on Maria's head and neck. Her attempts to protect herself were useless against an animal so much stronger. The bear's claws tore across her torso and limbs, opening deep gashes. It was methodical, brutal, driven by the need to protect her cubs. Nearby residents, hearing the commotion, called 911 and tried to scare the bear away. Eventually, the mother bear retreated with her cubs, leaving Maria motionless on the street. Paramedics arrived quickly, but it was too late. Maria had died from massive head and neck trauma. Rebecca's daily feeding routine was always the most dangerous part of her day. As evening approached, she filled 5 buckets with kibble, the metallic clanging sending the dogs into a frenzy of anticipation. The ground was still wet from an afternoon thunderstorm as she approached the main enclosure. Buckets in hand, the 3 large dogs pressed against the fence, their eyes locked at the food, muscles tense with anticipation. She had done this thousands of times before, but that night felt different. The air seemed charged with more than just humidity. As Rebecca unlatched the gate and stepped into the enclosure, her worn boots slipped on the muddy ground. She stumbled, trying to regain her balance, but the weight of the buckets pulled her down. The metal containers crashed to the earth, spilling kibble across the wet dirt. Rex was the first to move, but as Rebecca struggled to get back on her feet, something in his demeanor shifted. His eyes, which had been focused on the kibble, now locked onto her. At that moment, she wasn't the woman who had saved him. She was in competition for resources. The attack came without warning. Rex's 90 lbs of muscle slammed into Rebecca's chest, driving her back to the ground. His jaws clamped down on her shoulder, tearing through flesh with devastating force. Rebecca's scream pierced the evening air, but there was no one around for miles to hear it. Titan and Scar joined the assault within seconds, their pack instincts overriding years of rehabilitation. Titan's massive jaws found her left arm, shaking violently. Scar circled behind, his teeth sinking into her legs, dragging her further from the gate. Rebecca fought desperately, her free hand clawing at Rex's face, trying to break his grip. But the dogs were in full predatory mode now, their attacks coordinated and relentless. Blood soaked into the muddy ground as they continued their assault, their growls mixing with Rebecca's weakening cries. The feeding frenzy lasted nearly 10 minutes before the dogs finally backed away. Rebecca lay motionless in the mud, her body broken and torn, surrounded by the scattered kibble that had triggered the attack. For 3 days, Rebecca's body remained undiscovered on the isolated property. It wasn't until a delivery driver arrived with dog food that the scene was uncovered. Animal control officers found the 3 attacking dogs still in the enclosure, showing no signs of continued aggression. Rex, Titan, and Scar were euthanized within hours, along with 12 other dogs deemed too dangerous for relocation. Rebecca's death sparked debates about unlicensed rescue operations. New regulations were implemented, requiring permits for anyone housing more than 10 rescue animals. But for those who knew Rebecca, the rules came too late. Then there's the case of Camille Morel. It was April 3rd, 2017, in Thor, France. Inside the Thor Zoo Safari Park, the wolf sector, adjacent to the bison paddock meant to mimic the wild stillness of Yellowstone, seemed calm. Yet, within the shadows of its pines, something alive and waiting stirred. A quiet rhythm of movement that would soon break that silence for good. Camille Morel was 29, a fitness instructor from Versailles who lived by routine. Known among her clients for her precision and self-discipline, she maintained the same training schedule no matter where she was. After 6 months of non-stop classes at her studio, she decided to spend a weekend at the Thor Zoo Safari, one of the few places near Paris offering guests an overnight wilderness immersion without leaving the country. It wasn't her first visit. She'd stayed once before and remembered the tranquility of waking to animal sounds instead of traffic. She booked the chalet not just for rest, but to keep her running habit intact in the open air. To friends, Camille's decision made sense. The park's trails and guest roads were well marked and safe during visiting hours. She'd read the safety pamphlet about restricted areas and believed her familiarity with the grounds made her cautious enough. Her chalet overlooked the fenced wolf sector adjacent to the bison range, a layout designed to reduce mixed species stress and liability during guest drives. The animals were separated by natural barriers and double fence zones, and guests were told the viewing area was completely secure. Camille trusted the system. Her goal that morning was simple: a quick 2-mile jog before breakfast, the same as she did every morning at home. The zoo's landscape was a strange fusion of natural calm and controlled wilderness, pine trees in neat clusters, sandy trails, and an artificial stream running through the lands. At dawn, the service road and the inner track appeared nearly identical, a known issue in drive-through parks where early light flattens contrast. Beyond the chalet's edge stretched a gravel service road used by rangers and tour jeeps. The wolves' territory extended across nearly 20 acres of wooded ground. Grey wolves, the largest of the canids, can weigh over 100 Lebarkin and run up to 30 pH for short bursts. Pack behavior revolves around cooperation and hierarchy. Most attacks on humans occur only when the animals feel threatened, cornered, or see unusual movement that triggers pursuit. In captivity, stress or broken boundaries can alter those instincts. That morning, a scheduled maintenance check had delayed some of the park's early operations. Workers had opened an internal service gate near the chalet to move a small utility vehicle through. Overnight, frost had iced the latch mechanism, preventing full engagement of the double lock. And when one of the workers received a call about a mechanical issue elsewhere, he left under maintenance override without confirming it was secure. The gate's interlock was meant to be re-engaged once staff passed, a step that failed. Around 7 a.m., Camille stepped outside with her phone and a small water bottle. She jogged down the gravel path that bordered the guest area, seeing no posted "I can't forget the image of Camille running," glancing back at the wolves. It stayed with me for days. She must have been so confused, thinking the fence was nearby. But it wasn't. She had been jogging on a road, assuming it looped back safely toward the perimeter trail. By 7:20 a.m., she was nearly half a mile in, the road dipping slightly, flanked by pines and open brush. Unknowingly, she crossed into the wolf enclave. The wolves, fed the previous evening, were restless after a cold night. 3 of them, the dominant male and 2 subordinates, were near the northern edge, sensing human movement. A zookeeper in the observation tower saw the lone jogger and radioed for confirmation that the route was clear. Seconds later, the horrible realization dawned. She was inside the enclave. He shouted into the radio for a patrol, but before anyone could answer, the calm shattered. The wolves emerged from the trees, low to the ground, tails stiff, heads aligned. Camille slowed, confused, not immediately panicked. She'd seen them behind fences before. When they began advancing in a slow, deliberate arc, she froze. She turned, saw the empty gravel behind her, and started jogging back, faster this time. The wolves matched her pace, then accelerated, paws thudding against the dirt. She broke into a sprint. The zookeeper watched as Camille glanced back once more. Near a drainage trench, her foot caught on the uneven gravel, and she fell forward, hitting hard. Before she could push herself up, the lead wolf clamped down on her right thigh, pulling backward with a violent jerk. She twisted, trying to kick free, but another wolf lunged at her shoulder. Her scream carried across the enclosure, high and ragged. The zookeeper sounded the alarm and radioed the rangers. The response vehicle was rerouted around the inner fence lines, delaying arrival to just under 10 minutes. Within normal range for a keeper-initiated emergency call, 2 more wolves joined, surrounding her as she tried to crawl toward the ditch. The lead wolf released and re-gripped higher, its teeth sinking into her hip. She struck out with her hands, scraping the gravel, trying to push herself forward. But one of the animals bit into her arm, shaking until it tore free. Within moments, she was on her back, thrashing as the pack pulled from opposite sides. She kicked weakly once more, then went still. Rangers arrived in a vehicle within 10 minutes, finding the wolves clustered over Camille's body, heads low and jaws working. Warning shots sent the pack scattering into the trees. 2 rangers approached as another called for a tranquilizer team. Camille lay on her side, clothing torn, deep bites from shoulder to thigh. One ranger checked for a pulse and found none. They covered her with a thermal blanket and secured the area until all 5 wolves were sedated. An autopsy confirmed death by exsanguination, massive blood loss due to multiple deep lacerations, and crushing trauma to the limbs. The body was transported under escort to Versailles. That afternoon, Camille's family filed a civil lawsuit against the Thori Zoo Safari and its parent company, alleging gross negligence and breach of safety protocol. After a year of investigation and hearings, the court ruled in favor of the family, and the park quietly settled without appeal. Following the incident, a criminal negligence inquiry and an independent enclos audit were conducted. Thori Zoo Safari implemented procedural retrofits, installing interlocks and alarms that trigger if any gate remains unlatched for more than 15 seconds. It was July 22, 2016. The scorching Oklahoma sun beat down on the dusty grounds of Wild Art Big Hat Sanctuary, a privately owned facility nestled among rolling hills 30 miles outside Tulsa. The 50-acre property housed over 20 rescued lions, tigers, and other exotic cats in a collection of chain-link enclos that stretched across the rural landscape. The afternoon air shimmered with heat, while the distant sounds of roaring and pacing echoed from various habitats as the cats sought shade from the oppressive summer temperatures. Ashley Martinez, a 23-year-old college student from Dallas, had discovered the sanctuary through social media, while road tripping with her boyfriend Jake through Oklahoma's quirky roadside attractions. Ashley was constantly seeking unique photo opportunities for her personal memories. Having grown up taking pictures at every family vacations and special event, her phone was filled with daredevil shots from cliff edges, abandoned buildings, and extreme sports activities that showcased her fearless personality to friends and family. Ashley had grown up in suburban Dallas as the youngest of 3 sisters, developing a competitive streak that drove her to constantly push boundaries and seek attention through increasingly dramatic stunts. Her psychology major at Texas Tech University had given her confidence in reading people and situations, but her academic knowledge didn't extend to understanding animal behavior. That afternoon, Ashley and Jacob paid the sanctuary's fee for a close encounter experience, that promised visitors the chance to observe big cats during feeding demonstrations and educational presentations. The facility operated in a legal grey area, offering interactions that legitimate zoos and accredited sanctuaries would never permit. African lions are apex predators that retain all their wild instincts regardless of human contact or hand-rearing. Adult males can weigh up to 420 pounds and possess incredible strength, speed, and territorial behaviours that make them extremely dangerous in captivity. Lions are social animals with complex hierarchies, but they view humans as either threats to be eliminated or prey to be consumed. Their powerful jaws can deliver bite forces exceeding 650 pounds per square inch, while their razor-sharp claws can inflict fatal wounds with a single swipe. I've seen the photos, of course. The ones taken right before the unthinkable happened. It's chilling how quickly things can turn. Ashley, as I understand it, was visiting a sanctuary. She was excited, like many of us would be, to see these magnificent creatures up close. There was a lion there, Caesar, a 400-pound African male. He'd been hand-raised and seemed remarkably calm. As the tour ended, Ashley saw her chance. She wanted that perfect photo, a selfie with Caesar. She asked her friend to distract the owner while she climbed over the barrier. A 4-foot chain-link fence. Caesar was about 10 feet away, watching her. His eyes tracked her, but he didn't seem aggressive. Ashley crouched down, phone in hand. But as she moved closer, Caesar's demeanour shifted. His ears flattened. His tail twitched. Then, with explosive suddenness, he attacked. It was instinct, millions of years of programming, recognizing her as prey in his territory. He covered the distance in a single bound. Her phone flew from her hand as he struck her chest. His claws tore into her torso and shoulders. His jaws clamped down on her neck, teeth puncturing muscle and vertebrae. The attack continued, claws raking, bite crushing. Ashley grew weaker from blood loss and spinal trauma. Her friend's screams brought the owner running, but it was too dangerous to intervene. Within minutes, Ashley was gone. The facility, it turned out, was operating without proper permits or insurance. Caesar was moved to an accredited sanctuary. Ashley's death led to stricter regulations for exotic animal facilities. I've seen firsthand how quickly life can vanish. Just ask the clients who watched Giovanni collapse, blood pooling around his collar in the frozen night. A single scream, a desperate swing of a torch, and then silence. He was gone. The rangers arrived to find his body partially covered, his face intact, but the left side of his neck crushed. It was ruled a freak accident, a twist at the wrong moment, a tear that ended everything almost instantly. It reminds me of another tragedy I came across in my research, one that unfolded far away, in the Sundarbans National Park in West Bengal, India, on July 15, 2016. The Lawson family had arrived there, ready to experience the vast mangrove delta. It's a place where the Ganges meets the Bay of Bengal, a UNESCO site, but also, undeniably, one of the world's most dangerous ecosystems. Saltwater crocodiles lurk, venomous snakes coil, and then there are the tigers. I've seen the aftermath of such encounters in my time as an archaeologist, and they haunt me still. The crushed windpipe, severed arteries, forced submersion. Genevieve's struggles ended as blood loss and oxygen deprivation took hold. The tiger held her underwater for minutes more, then vanished back into the mangrove. It was November 15th, 2016, in the remote forests of Primorsky Krai, eastern Russia. Snow fell, muting the sounds of the taiga. Nikolai Baranov's radio had been silent since morning. The last check-in was brief, routine, giving no hint of what awaited him. Nikolai was 52, a forestry worker who'd spent most of his life in those forests, managing patrols in the buffer zones near the Cody Allen Mountains. He monitored traps, logging boundaries, and poaching activity. He lived alone near Dalna, his routine built around the forest's rhythms. That week, he was surveying a hunting reserve, following reports of wolves pushing closer to villages. He rode out before dawn on his snowmobile, a canvas bag packed with bread, tea, a hand axe, and flares. Colleagues said he preferred working solo, claiming a second engine just scared off wildlife. That day's assignment was simple: document animal tracks after the first full snow. Wolves had been increasingly active, driven from higher ground, after a collapse in wild boar numbers. Wolves there could travel up to 20 miles in a single night, driven by hunger across frozen ground and sparse woodland. Their diets shifted with the season: deer in autumn, carrion, smaller mammals. In the hard months of winter, when deep cold set in and prey vanished beneath ice or snow, instinct sometimes blurred into desperation. A human scent, faint and unfamiliar, might still trigger the same ancient reflex to follow, test, and close the distance. Locals warned of animals following sled trails at dusk. Nikolai heard the same warnings at the station that morning, but didn't take them seriously. He had checked his flare gun, but left his rifle behind, citing its weight. By noon, the weather had shifted fast, gusting snow and dropping visibility. His supervisor made several radio attempts that went unanswered, assuming battery failure from the cold. When evening came, and Nikolai still hadn't returned, Yevgen, a neighbouring ranger and longtime friend, prepared to follow his route before dark. Evgeny rode out around 5 p.m. with a flashlight mounted on his snowmobile and a sidearm holstered under his coat. The tracks were faint but visible, a single snowmobile line winding north, then stopping abruptly about 800 meters from the ridge. There, the engine was half buried in snow, its headlight still faintly glowing. Prints showed that Nikolai had dismounted, perhaps to clear ice from the track. Around the site, another pattern emerged. Paw marks, deep and overlapping, circling. The snow bore drag lines, evidence of pacing. Then the circle tightened. From that point, the scene unfolded through what Yevgeny later described as a sequence of struggle. Human footprints turned erratic, moving backward. Closer inspection revealed a snapped branch at chest height and a torn glove 10 feet away. A smear of blood marked the snowmobile's side panel. 30 feet beyond, the snow showed clear impressions of multiple bodies pressing down. Wolves and man. The wolves had likely approached silently, using the cover of snowfall and wind. Initial bites were to the legs, pulling him down. Blood spray against nearby birch bark indicated arterial injury within seconds. As the attack progressed, the evidence suggested coordinated movement. Bite patterns indicated coordinated restraint from multiple angles. His jacket was shredded along the spine, showing where one animal had clamped onto his back, while another tore at the neck. Boot prints ended mid-stride, replaced by drag marks. Ivani followed them cautiously, revolver drawn. The forest was unnervingly still. He found the body 30 meters downhill near a frozen stream. The snow around it was flattened and red. The wolves had likely fed briefly before retreating. Later investigations showed that the surrounding prints showed at least 4 individuals, 2 larger adults, 2 smaller juveniles. Ivani radioed the base immediately. It took nearly an hour for a snow vehicle from the nearest post to arrive, by which time darkness had swallowed the clearing. The men lifted the body onto a tarp, careful not to disturb the bite patterns for analysis. The stench of blood lingered even in the cold. The pack didn't return, but distant howls echoed as the rescuers secured the area. Nikolai's remains were taken to Dalna for examination. Autopsy confirmed catastrophic blood loss with multiple punctures to major vessels and crushing trauma to the neck vertebrae consistent with a fatal bite. Time of death was estimated shortly after the onset of the attack. The official report listed predatory behavior exacerbated by winter scarcity. Specialists noted that 2016 saw an unusual decline in prey density across the region. The incident received a single mention on regional news, framed as a tragic encounter during severe weather. There was no footage, only photographs from the recovery team that were never released publicly. It was June 14, 2015, and the Sunset Lake subdivision in suburban Tampa, Florida, was settling into another warm summer evening. The gated community, built around a series of interconnected retention ponds and decorative canals, had been marketed as a tropical paradise for retirees seeking the Florida lifestyle. Walter Walt Kowalski, a 67-year-old retired plumber from Ohio, was enjoying his 5th year in the Sunshine State from the comfort of his backyard patio, which overlooked one of the community's scenic waterways. Walt had moved the Sunset Lakes community in Florida. It was built on reclaimed wetlands, developers carving out retention ponds and canals. These weren't just for managing storm runoff, but to create attractive water features. I've always found something unsettling about the way we reshape nature to fit our ideals. These artificial waterways connected to natural creek systems, flowing into Tampa Bay, corridors for wildlife between development and wilderness. But sometimes those corridors lead to tragedy. Walt, a retired plumber from Ohio, had moved there seeking year-round golf and fishing. He bought a modest ranch with water access, a private dock where he'd fish and feed the ducks. His evening ritual, sitting on the patio, beer in hand, watching the sunset, tossing breadcrumbs to the waterfowl. It was a peaceful scene, a picture of contentment. But Walt's routine inadvertently attracted something far more dangerous than ducks: American alligators, apex predators unchanged for over 200 million years, perfectly adapted ambush hunters. Adult males can reach 14 feet, weigh over 1,000 pounds, their jaws capable of exerting 3,000 pounds of press per square inch. They'll consume anything they can overpower. One evening, Walt was relaxing when he noticed his favorite fishing lure tangled in vegetation near the dock. He waded into the knee-deep water, using a net to free it. He'd done this countless times. he felt safe. But a 12-foot male alligator had been submerged, motionless, for over an hour, waiting for the ducks. It exploded upward with devastating force. Its jaws clamped on Walt's right leg. The bite fractured his femur, severing arteries. The alligator initiated its signature death roll, spinning violently. Walt was pulled into the canal. Within minutes, he was gone. Emergency responders arrived quickly, but the alligator had already retreated with Walt's body. The investigation revealed that Walt's duck feeding had drawn the alligator to his property. A dangerous situation, culminating in a fatal attack. The community immediately changed its water safety protocols, installing warning signs. It was September 8, 2014. On that same day, far south of there, the vast wetlands of the Florida Everglades stretched endlessly under the blazing sun. Sawgrass prairies and cypress swamps teeming with wildlife. Remote waterways buzzed with airboat tours, carrying tourists deep into alligator territory. Michael Chen, a 35-year-old software engineer from Seattle, was visiting Florida for the first time. A cross-country road trip to celebrate a promotion. He'd always been fascinated by technology and outdoor adventure, hiking in the Pacific Northwest. His engineering background gave him confidence in analyzing risks. But his experience with dangerous wildlife was limited. He'd grown up in urban Seattle, developing his love of nature through weekend camping trips. His methodical approach had made him successful, but perhaps too confident. He enjoyed taking photos of his travels. That afternoon, Michael joined a small group airboat tour, promising close encounters with alligators. The tour guide, a weathered Floridian with decades of swamp experience, repeatedly warned passengers to remain seated and keep their hands inside the boat at all times. American alligators, apex predators, unchanged for over 200 million years. I'll never forget reading about the alligator's bite. Over 3,000 pounds of pres per square inch. An almost incomprehensible force, really. It's a power perfectly adapted for ambush hunting in the water. Adult males can reach 14 feet in length and weigh over 1,000 pounds. They can launch themselves partially out of the water with explosive force. Anything moving near their territory is either prey or a threat to be eliminated. The airboat tour had been going smoothly for almost an hour when the guide pointed out a huge alligator sunning itself on a mudbank, maybe 20 feet away. It was an impressive specimen, easily 12 feet long and weighing over 800 pounds. It lay there, prehistoric and still, in the afternoon heat. One of the passengers, Michael, started taking pictures, excited to show his colleagues back in Seattle such an amazing animal in the wild. But his excitement got the better of his judgment. He leaned farther and farther over the edge of the boat, trying to get a better shot. Then the unthinkable happened. Michael's phone slipped out of his hand and started to fall toward the water. Without even thinking, he lunged forward, reaching out to catch the phone before it disappeared into the swamp. The alligator had been watching the boat with the patient focus of a predator. Michael's sudden movement triggered its attack. The 800-pound reptile exploded from the mudbank with terrifying speed. Its powerful tail propelled it through the water like a missile, aimed right at Michael. The alligator's massive jaws clamped down on Michael's outstretched arm with bone-crushing force. 3,000 pounds of bite press instantly shattered bones and severed arteries. Michael's scream of shock and pain echoed across the swamp as the reptile's momentum pulled him over the side of the airboat and into the dark water. The tour guide and the other passengers grabbed at Michael's legs, trying to pull him back into the boat, while the alligator held onto his arm. The alligator began its signature death roll, spinning rapidly in the water while maintaining its grip. Michael's struggles weakened as the blood loss, crushing injuries, and a drowning overwhelmed him. The alligator never loosened its grip as it continued the death roll with mechanical precision. Each rotation caused more trauma, ensuring its prey couldn't escape. Within minutes, Michael's movement stopped. The alligator's brutal assault had been fatal. The massive reptile dragged his body into deeper water, where it disappeared beneath the surface with its kill. Emergency responders arrived within the hour, but Michael's body wasn't recovered until the next day, when wildlife officials located the alligator and retrieved his remains. The tour company immediately put up physical barriers around all the passenger seating areas and made the safety briefings more thorough. Michael's death led his family to push for stricter safety regulations in the wildlife tourism industry. The incident became a cautionary tale about the dangers of ignoring safety warnings around apex predators and prioritizing photography over personal safety. It was July 8, 2017. The Detroit summer heat shimmered off the abandoned lots as Maria Santos loaded her car with dog food and water. At 28, she'd spent 5 years walking dogs by day and feeding Detroit's feral population by night. Recently laid off, she'd been spending more time in dangerous neighborhoods, trying to help animals most people considered beyond saving. The economic collapse had hit Detroit hard, leaving entire neighborhoods abandoned and creating perfect breeding grounds for packs of wild dogs. These weren't lost pets. They were second and third generation feral animals that had never known human kindness, surviving by scavenging and defending territory with savage efficiency. Maria's regular route took her through 6 abandoned lots, each home to a different pack. She knew their hierarchies, feeding schedules, and individual personalities. But the newest group worried her the most. 6 dogs led by a large German Shepherd mix she'd nicknamed Alpha, including several animals she didn't recognize. This pack was hungrier, more aggressive, and less predictable than the others. But Maria's compassion overruled her caution. These animals needed help, and she was the only one willing to provide it. As twilight settled over the abandoned neighborhood, Maria parked near the lot where Alpha's pack had made their home. The area was a wasteland of broken concrete and waist-high weeds, perfect cover for animals that had learned to hunt and hide. Maria had been feeding this pack for 3 weeks, always keeping a safe distance. But tonight felt different. The dogs seemed more agitated, their movements more coordinated, their attention more focused on her than on the food. What she didn't realize was that the pack dynamics had shifted with the addition of 3 new dogs, animals that saw humans not as providers, but as competitors. Alpha emerged from the shadows first, his 80-pound frame moving with predatory grace. It began on September 8, 2015, when Kendra Sullivan arrived at the Namba Island Chimpanzee Sanctuary in Uganda. It's a 100-acre forested island on Lake Victoria. The sanctuary was a refuge for orphaned and rescued chimpanzees, providing a semi-natural environment for them to live in social groups. Kendra, a 35-year-old wildlife photographer, had been commissioned to document rehabilitation work with these chimpanzees. Her friend, Amy Chen, a documentary filmmaker, accompanied her. But from the start, the sanctuary's director, Dr. James Mukasa, had concerns, as Kendra dismissed safety briefings and demanded access to restricted maintenance areas. Peter Sally, a caretaker, warned her about the unpredictable nature of the animals. The sanctuary housed 49 rescued chimpanzees, many traumatized by poaching or the illegal pet trade. Despite their rehabilitation, these animals retained all the instincts and physical capabilities of their wild counterparts. Chimpanzees are among the most powerful primates, possessing strength 5 times greater than an adult human. Adult males can weigh up to 150 pounds and stand over 4 feet tall, with massive muscles and arms capable of exerting tremendous force. Their hands possess a grip strength exceeding 1,300 pounds per square inch, enough to crush bones. And, most notably, they possess large canine teeth, over 2 inches long, designed for defense and establishing dominance. During an afternoon tour, Kendra grew frustrated with the viewing restrictions. She wanted access to maintenance areas where staff entered on close for cleaning and medical care. Dr. Mukasa explained that these areas were strictly off limits due to the extreme danger of direct contact with the chimpanzees. While the group observed chimpanzees in a distant enclave, Kendra noticed an unlocked gate leading to a maintenance corridor that provided direct access to the animal's living area. Despite explicit warnings, she slipped away from the group and entered the restricted zone, believing her experience with domestic animals had prepared her for anything. The maintenance area brought Kendra within direct reach of Boso, the sanctuary's dominant male, a 150-pound adult who had been rescued as an infant 15 years earlier. Boso had shown aggressive tendencies toward unfamiliar humans and was considered one of the most dangerous animals in the facility. The powerful chimpanzee was resting near the barrier when he detected Kendra's presence. Chimpanzees are highly territorial animals that view unfamiliar humans as potential threats. Boso immediately became agitated by Kendra's intrusion into what he considered his territory. When she approached the barrier and raised her camera to photograph him, Boso interpreted this action as a direct challenge to his dominance. The primate's response was immediate. Boso lunged forward and grabbed Kendra's extended arm with crushing force. I've seen the aftermath of chimpanzee attacks, the brutal, targeted precision of their aggression. It's not random. They instinctively go for faces, hands, genitals, places to inflict maximum damage. I remember reading once about a woman named Kendra who suffered such an attack. It's a case that still haunts me. It happened at a research facility. A chimpanzee named Boso, driven by some primal rage, managed to reach through the barrier separating him from her. The report said the force he exerted was something like 300 pounds per square inch, immediately fracturing the bones in her forearm. He pulled her against that barrier with terrifying strength. His canine teeth, over 2 inches long and razor-sharp, tore into her face and neck. His hands ripped at her clothing. His feet kicked violently. The attack lasted for nearly 2 minutes. 2 minutes of hell. His jaws crushed facial bones, tore away large sections of skin and muscle. The chimpanzee's sharp teeth severed major blood vessels in her neck, causing massive bleeding. Her attempts to defend herself were futile against his overwhelming power. Her free hand was severely mutilated, several fingers crushed by his jaws. The coordinated nature of his attack prevented any possibility of escape. Another man, Peter, heard Kendra's screams and rushed to help with high-press water hoses, driving Boso away after almost 2 minutes. By then, Kendra had suffered catastrophic injuries to her face, neck, hands, and arms. The massive blood loss, combined with shock, proved fatal within minutes. She died from hypovolemic shock and facial trauma before emergency services could reach the remote island. The investigation, as it always does, focused on security failures. Kendra's family filed lawsuits. Then there's the story from February 9th, 2014, near Langer, Saskatchewan. It was a seemingly normal morning in the northern boreal forest. 2 men were setting out for what they thought would be a routine trip into familiar woods. But it turned into something unimaginable. David Lasky was 45, a part-time wildlife photographer. He lived just outside Prince Albert with his wife and a teenage son. For years, he'd tracked animal behavior with remote cameras, learning to move silently and read patterns in the snow. Photography was his passion, a side income. His real job was at a lumber supply store, but weekends belonged to the woods. His cousin Jeff, 42, often joined him on winter runs to retrieve SD cards from trail cams. They'd grown up hunting and fishing together, though neither carried a firearm anymore. That weekend, after a light snowfall, late-season hunger had made local deer scarce. David wanted to check cameras he'd left by a frozen creek north of Waskew Lake. They'd heard distant howls before, never close. David believed wolves avoided humans by instinct. The plan was simple: a 2-hour ride by snowmobile, a short hike to the cameras, and back before dusk. The wolves in that region were typically grey, thick-coated animals averaging about 90 pounds. They moved in tight family groups, 4 to 8. Their strength lay in coordination, silent pursuit, strategic circling, and patience rather than outright speed. Under normal conditions, they avoided people entirely, focusing on deer and moose along the forest edges. The men dressed in insulated gear and carried only a single red flare for safety. By 9:30 a.m., they parked their snowmobile near the creek and began walking the last half mile through packed snow, their breath hanging in the still air. At first, everything was normal. They reached the first camera, brushed off the lens, and swapped the SD card. Around 10:15, as they crossed the creek, Jeff's boot slipped on a patch of ice. David crouched to help him up, steadying his cousin by the arm. That's when both noticed faint movement among the tree line across the creek. The animals stood still at first, only their eyes catching light. Jeff straightened and waved his arms, shouting to scare them off. The wolves didn't run. Unbeknownst to the men, a freshly killed deer lay half buried in snow about 20 yards behind the tree line. A cached carcass the wolves had dragged there the night before. The pack was food-stressed, defending the cache rather than hunting. They began to fan out slowly, forming a loose semicircle. David muttered that they were just curious. That noise would drive them away. But even as he spoke, one of the wolves lowered its head and started advancing. The men began backing up the slope toward their snowmobile, moving quickly, but without turning. The wolves followed, quiet and steady. Then the first lunge came. A grey blur across the ice, jaws clamping onto the back of David's leg. The impact drove him face first into the snow. Jeff spun and reached for the flare, but his gloves fumbled with the cap. 2 more wolves broke from the trees, bounding fast, their paws sending up bursts of white powder. David tried to kick free, leaving streaks of blood against the snow. He managed to roll onto his back and swing an arm, hitting one wolf across the muzzle with his camera bag. But another struck from the side, teeth finding his shoulder. Jeff finally snapped the flare to life, the red flame hissing. He swung it toward the animals. One wolf snarled and darted back, fur singed along its flank, but the others held ground. David was on his knees now, one hand pressed to his thigh, blood pumping dark and fast through his fingers. He tried to rise, but his leg gave out beneath him. Jeff charged forward with the flare, yelling, waving it more aggressively. The heat drove them back momentarily, circling just out of reach. David slumped sideways. I find myself haunted by stories where the line between the human world and the wild blurs, sometimes tragically. Consider the case of David, up in the wilderness. His life ended because of a wolf pack defending a food cache. It mattered little whether they were hunting or defending when Jeff, his cousin, found him. Jeff, breath shallow, swung a burning flare, trying to keep the wolves at bay. They retreated, growling, into the trees. He pressed on David's wound, but it was too deep. The movement stopped within a minute. He pulled David's camera bag close and used his phone to call for help. The reception cut in and out, but a faint signal reached a nearby ranger station. Authorities arrived about 40 minutes later by snowmobile. They found Jeff sitting beside the body, shaking uncontrollably. Wolf tracks surrounded the site in a broad ring, drag marks leading back toward the tree line and the deer carcass. The official report listed the cause of death as exsanguination from femoral artery trauma, consistent with large animal bites. Provincial conservation officers, assisted by federal wildlife agents, closed the area within the hour. Samples were taken from bite margins for DNA analysis, and the implicated pack was later trapped and relocated to a remote management zone north of Reindeer Lake. Wildlife biologists suggested the wolves had been defending a food cache, not actively hunting. Then, almost impossibly, another tragedy, miles away, but with the same feeling of nature closing in. It was December 9th, 2018, an unusually warm winter evening in Canyon Vista, a hillside community in suburban Los Angeles. The residential development, built where urban sprawl met the wild chaparral of the Santa Monica Mountains, featured homes perched on steep slopes with spectacular views of the city below. Kevin Chen, a 16-year-old high school junior and varsity basketball player, was running late after practice and decided to take his usual shortcut through an undeveloped lot, rather than follow the longer route along the main road. Kevin was an honor student and star athlete. balancing academic excellence with athletic achievement, earning recognition as one of his school's most promising college prospects. He lived with his parents and younger sister in a modern home that backed up against the natural open space that made Canyon Vista such a desirable address. Kevin often used the informal trails and vacant lots to move quickly between his home and school, a practice that had never caused any problems during his 4 years in the neighborhood. The Canyon Vista area had been experiencing increased wildlife activity, following a series of devastating wildfires that had burned thousands of acres in the surrounding mountains. The fires had displaced numerous predators, forcing them to seek new territory and food sources in areas they had previously avoided. Local authorities had issued warnings about mountain lion sightings in residential areas, but most residents viewed these as routine precautions rather than serious threats. Kevin was aware of the wildlife warnings, but had never encountered any dangerous animals during his frequent use of the neighborhood's informal trail system. He carried his basketball gear in a backpack and typically moved quickly through the undeveloped areas, confident that his familiarity with the terrain and his athletic ability would keep him safe from any potential threats. Mountain lions are solitary predators that require large territories to support their hunting needs, with adult males controlling ranges of up to 100 square miles. Juvenile males are particularly dangerous as they establish new territories, often displaying more aggressive behavior than experienced adults. These young cats are less skilled at hunting natural prey and may target easier victims, including domestic animals and occasionally humans. Mountain lions are capable of incredible stealth and can stalk prey for extended periods before launching surprise attacks from close range. As Kevin jogged through the overgrown vacant lot, he was unaware that an 80 lb juvenile male mountain lion had been using the area as a hunting ground for domestic cats and small dogs that wandered from nearby homes. The young cat had been displaced from his natal territory by an older, more dominant male, and was desperately seeking to establish new hunting grounds that could support his survival. The mountain lion had been stalking Kevin for several hundred yards, moving silently through the dense brush while staying downwind to avoid detection. The cat's hunting instincts were triggered by Kevin's size, movement pattern, and the fact that he was alone and vulnerable in the predator's newly claimed territory. The attack came from behind as Kevin navigated through a particularly dense section of chaparral. The 80 lb mountain lion launched himself from the brush with explosive force, his powerful hind legs propelling him through the air to land squarely on Kevin's back. The impact drove Kevin face first into the rocky ground, while the cat's claws found purchase in his shoulders and back. The mountain lion's jaws clamped down on the back of Kevin's neck, his foreign canine teeth puncturing through muscle and vertebrae, while his bite force targeted the spinal cord. Kevin's attempts to fight back with his backpack proved futile against the cat's superior strength and positioning. The mountain lion's razor-sharp claws raked across Kevin's shoulders and torso, each swipe opening deep gashes that caused massive blood loss. Kevin's screams for help echoed through the hillside community, alerting residents in nearby homes to the emergency unfolding in the vacant lot. Several homeowners called 911 while attempting to locate the source of the disturbance, but the dense vegetation made it difficult to pinpoint Kevin's exact location. The mountain lion continued his attack for several minutes, driven by predatory instincts and the stress of establishing new territory. Police and paramedics arrived within 10 minutes of the first 911 call, using Kevin's continued cries for help to locate him in the brush. There's a chilling story I read recently about a mountain lion, wildfires, and a tragic encounter in a residential area. The mountain lion, displaced by the fires, was trying to establish new territory. It ended with a man losing his life. It reminds me how easily the wild can encroach upon our constructed world and the devastating consequences that can follow. It was November 3rd, 2015, when a very different kind of wildlife tragedy unfolded, this time on the sprawling 300 acres of the Lonia Exotic Ranch in East Texas. This was a place where wealthy clients paid handsomely for photo sessions with dangerous predators. It operated in the shadows, offering interactions that any accredited zoo would immediately reject. I've always found these kinds of places deeply unsettling. They seem to prioritize thrills over genuine conservation. That afternoon, the sun cast long shadows across the custom-built enclose that housed tigers, lions, and other big cats acquired through channels I can only imagine were questionable. A 27-year-old personal trainer from Houston, named Brandon Walsh, had heard about the ranch through word of mouth. He was, by all accounts, passionate about fitness and adventure, always looking for new challenges. He'd saved for months to afford this experience, viewing it as the ultimate test of his courage and confidence around dangerous animals. Brandon had built his business through hard work, developing a reputation for helping clients overcome their fears and achieve impossible fitness goals. His confidence and fearless approach had made him popular, though perhaps his success had made him overconfident in his ability to handle any dangerous situation. That day, Brandon paid the rancher's fee for a private photo session with Sasha, a 300-pound female Bengal tiger who had been hand-raised from a cub. The ranch owner, a former circus trainer, agreed to supervise the session, but repeatedly emphasized the extreme dangers. And Bengal tigers are, without question, apex predators. Adult females can weigh up to 350 pounds, possessing incredible strength, speed, and hunting instincts that remain sharp, regardless of human contact. They're solitary, territorial animals that can become extremely aggressive when their space is violated. Their jaws can deliver bite forces exceeding 1,000 pounds per square inch, and their claws can grow up to 4 inches long. The photo session started with Brandon outside Sasha's enclosure, capturing dramatic shots of himself posed near the massive predator, safely separated by the barrier. But Brandon quickly grew frustrated with the distance. He wanted closer contact to create the photos he had imagined. He convinced the ranch owner to allow him closer access to Sasha, arguing that his physical conditioning and confident energy would keep the tiger calm. Against his better judgment, and against all established safety protocols, the owner agreed to let Brandon enter a smaller holding area adjacent to Sasha's main enclosure. The holding area was separated from Sasha's territory by only a chain-link barrier, bringing Brandon within arm's reach of the massive predator. Brandon began posing for his camera, which was mounted on a tripod and set to take photos automatically. Then Brandon made a fatal mistake. He crouched down next to the barrier and extended his hand towards Sasha, believing that his confident demeanor would somehow demonstrate his dominance over the apex predator. The tiger's ears flattened slightly against her massive head, and her tail began twitching with increasing frequency. Sasha's attack was swift and devastating. The moment Brandon moved suddenly to adjust his pose, the tiger's hunting instincts activated with explosive force. Sasha launched herself at the barrier with tremendous power. Her massive paws struck the chain-link fencing, while her razor-sharp claws found purchase on Brandon's extended arm. The tiger's incredible strength pulled Brandon against the barrier, while her powerful jaws snapped at his position through the fencing. The tiger's claws raked across Brandon's arm and shoulder, opening deep gashes that immediately began bleeding profusely, while her crushing grip prevented any possibility of retreat. The ranch owner rushed to intervene, using emergency protocols to distract Sasha and force her to release her grip on Brandon. But the tiger's claws had already caused catastrophic damage to Brandon's arm and shoulder, severing major arteries and causing massive blood loss. Brandon collapsed from shock and blood loss within minutes of the attack. His physical conditioning proved useless against injuries that no human could. There are some stories I come across that stick with me, not because of their grandeur, but because of their stark, avoidable tragedy. The story of Brandon, for instance. He was a fitness enthusiast who lost his life in a photo shoot with a tiger named Sasha. Emergency responders arrived quickly, but it was too late. He died from massive trauma and blood loss. The ranch, it turned out, had been operating without proper permits or insurance, violating state regulations about public safety around dangerous animals. Sasha was moved to a proper sanctuary, and the facility was shut down. Brandon's death prompted more safety education, but it always feels like too little, too late. Then there's Tommy Rodriguez. It was August 19th, 2013, the Missouri heat heavy in the air, hanging over his remote property. The stench of neglect, they say, permeated everything. At 45, he'd been running puppy mills for over a decade, and financial press had forced him to cut corners. It was a decision that would cost him everything. His 20-acre property was a maze of kennels and converted sheds, housing nearly 80 dogs. He specialized in popular breeds, selling them for high prices to unsuspecting buyers. But the real money came from the security side of his operation. 4 massive dogs patrolling the perimeter, 2 cane corsos, each over 120 pounds, and 2 Mastiff mixes tipping the scales at nearly 140. These weren't pets, and they weren't breeding stock. They were weapons acquired from a defunct fighting operation and trained to be aggressive. For months, the financial press had been building. Veterinary bills, feed costs, facility maintenance had eaten into his profits. Increased scrutiny from animal welfare organizations had forced him to operate more carefully. But he'd been cutting back on everything: food, medical care, even basic maintenance. The guard dogs, once fed premium meat, had been reduced to scraps and cheap kibble. What Tommy didn't understand was that hungry guard dogs were exponentially more dangerous than well-fed ones. Hunger sharpened their predatory instincts, made them more territorial, and reduced their tolerance for human presence. The four animals that had once been content to patrol were now viewing everything on the property, including Tommy himself, as potential competition for scarce resources. The dogs had been showing signs of increased aggression for weeks. They'd begun fighting among themselves over food, marking territory more aggressively, and showing less deference to Tommy's commands. A smart operator would have recognized these warning signs. But Tommy was desperate, distracted, and dangerously overconfident. On that sweltering August night, Tommy made his final rounds of the property, checking on breeding females and security systems. It was past midnight, and the Missouri countryside was silent except for distant barking and the hum of inadequate ventilation fans. He carried a flashlight and a metal rod for moving aggressive animals, but his attention was focused on financial calculations rather than the danger lurking in the shadows. The guard dogs had been without food for 3 days, not by design, but because Tommy had been too busy dealing with a sick litter to maintain their feeding schedule. Their hunger had reached a critical point where survival instincts overrode years of conditioning. They were no longer guard dogs protecting property. They were predators looking for their next meal. Tommy's mistake was approaching the area where he kept the guard dogs without proper precautions. Normally, he would have fed them first, ensuring their compliance before entering their territory. But financial stress and exhaustion had made him careless, and he walked directly into their domain, carrying nothing but a flashlight and false confidence. The attack began when Brutus, the larger cane corso, emerged from the shadows near the feeding area. His 125-pound frame moved with surprising silence, his massive head lowered in a hunting posture that Tommy should have recognized as a threat. Behind him came the others: Titan, the second cane corso; Rex, a 140-pound Mastiff mix; and Scar, whose scarred muzzle told the story of his fighting background. Tommy realized the danger too late. As he turned to retreat, Brutus launched himself forward, his powerful jaws clamping down on Tommy's left eye with crushing force. The impact drove Tommy to the ground, his flashlight spinning away into darkness as he screamed for help that would never come. The other 3 dogs joined the attack within seconds, their pack instincts fully engaged. Rex grabbed Tommy's right arm, his massive jaws crushing bone as he shook violently. Titan went for the torso, his teeth tearing through clothing and flesh with mechanical efficiency. Scar circled the attack, darting in to bite and retreat, his fighting experience evident in his tactical approach. Tommy's screams echoed across the empty countryside, but his nearest neighbor was over 2 miles away. The dogs worked with the coordination of experienced predators, their attacks focused on disabling their prey rather than killing quickly. They had learned patience in their previous lives, and hunger had made them methodical in their violence. The assault continued for nearly 20 minutes, the dogs taking turns feeding on Tommy while he was still alive. His struggles grew weaker as blood loss and shock took their toll, but the animals showed no mercy. They had been conditioned to view violence as normal, hunger as constant, and humans as either threats or food sources. The animals he exploited for profit ultimately became his executioners. I've seen that happen more than once in my years of research. Their hunger and desperation turned them into the very monsters he tried to create. It's a haunting reminder that nature, even when twisted by human greed, often finds a way to balance the scales. I recall a case from August 22, 2014. The exclusive Cypress Point community on the edge of the Florida Everglades shimmered in the intense summer heat. This gated development, built on reclaimed wetlands with artificial lakes and water features, represented luxury living in South Florida. Roberto Mendez, a 35-year-old landscaper and small business owner, was working alone, maintaining the pristine grounds that made Cypress Point so desirable. He'd built his company from nothing, starting with a single lawn mower, expanding to serve wealthy communities. He took pride in his work, always going above and beyond. Roberto supported his wife and 2 young children through his business, often working long hours in the Florida heat to provide for their future. The Cypress Point development had been constructed on former Everglades wetlands. Developers created an elaborate system of decorative ponds and water features, connected to natural waterways through canals and drainage systems. The artificial lakes were stocked with ornamental fish and surrounded by tropical landscaping, which required constant maintenance. Recent heavy rains had raised water levels, creating ideal conditions for wildlife to move between natural and artificial water systems. Roberto was familiar with Florida's wildlife, having encountered alligators, snakes, and other dangerous animals during his years of outdoor work. He respected these creatures and typically checked water features carefully before working near them. On this particular afternoon, he was trimming decorative bushes around one of the community's smaller ornamental ponds when his expensive hedge trimmer slipped from his hands and fell into the shallow water. American alligators are perfectly camouflaged ambush predators, remaining motionless for hours while waiting for prey. Adult females typically measure 8 to 10 feet in length and can weigh up to 200 pounds, possessing incredible speed and power. Alligators are most dangerous when protecting nesting sites or when surprised by humans who venture into their territory. Their bite force exceeds 2,000 pounds per square inch, and their death roll technique is designed to disorient and drown prey. Roberto waded into the knee-deep ornamental pond to retrieve his hedge trimmer, assuming the manicured water feature was safe. The pond appeared peaceful and well-maintained, with no visible signs of wildlife among the aquatic plants and ornamental features. Roberto had worked around similar water features hundreds of times without incident. The attack came the moment Roberto's feet touched the pond's muddy bottom. A 10-foot female alligator, lying motionless among the decorative vegetation, exploded into action. Her powerful jaws clamped down on Roberto's right leg with devastating force. The massive reptile's bite instantly fractured his tibia and fibula, her teeth puncturing major arteries and muscle tissue. The alligator immediately initiated her signature death roll, spinning rapidly in the water while maintaining her crushing grip. The violent rotation pulled Roberto off his feet and into the deeper center of the pond, where the gator's aquatic advantages became overwhelming. Roberto's desperate attempts to break free only triggered the alligator's instincts to bite down harder and roll more aggressively. Roberto's screams for help echoed across the manicured grounds as the 10-foot alligator continued her relentless death roll. The spinning motion dislocated Roberto's knee and hip, causing massive internal bleeding and tissue damage. The ornamental pond's clear water turned red as Roberto's struggles grew weaker with each rotation. A homeowner working in his garden heard Roberto's cries and rushed to investigate. I have spent years studying animal attacks, trying to understand the precise chain of events that leads to these tragic encounters. Sometimes the details are so stark, so visceral, they stay with me long after I've closed the book. Take the case of Roberto, for instance. He was attacked by an alligator. By the time anyone could intervene, the alligator had dragged him to the deepest part of the pond. His attempts to reach the surface were thwarted. He drowned within minutes. The blood loss and trauma simply too much for his body to handle. Emergency responders arrived within 15 minutes of the 911 call, but it was too late. Wildlife officers eventually captured the 10-foot female alligator and relocated her to a remote area of the Everglades. It turned out that the ornamental pond's connection to natural waterways had allowed the alligator to enter the residential area undetected. Roberto's death led to immediate changes to the community's water feature management, including barriers between decorative ponds and natural drainage systems, and new safety protocols for maintenance workers. Then there's the story of Tara Whitfield, which unfolded on March 22, 2017. She arrived at the Neptune Islands off the coast of South Australia, a world-renowned destination for great white shark diving. The remote, rocky outcrops jutted from the ocean, surrounded by crystal-clear waters plunging to depths of over 200 feet. These waters serve as a natural highway for migrating great whites, drawing the massive predators to hunt the abundant seal colonies. Tara was a 38-year-old marine biology graduate student from Los Angeles. She had booked the most expensive shark cage diving package available, but she immediately began making unreasonable demands. Known for her entitled attitude, she berated Captain Steve Morrison and marine biologist Dr. Lisa Chen multiple times during the morning briefing. Her boyfriend watched uncomfortably as she screamed at the crew for what she called their pathetic safety restrictions. Captain Morrison, with 18 years of experience, had dealt with difficult clients before. But Tara's aggressive behavior and complete lack of empathy alarmed him. She repeatedly demanded that the protective cage be removed entirely, claiming she had paid premium prices and deserved unrestricted access to the sharks. When Dr. Lisa Chen attempted to explain the life-threatening dangers, Tara dismissed her as an incompetent employee who was clearly jealous of successful people. She had convinced herself that her graduate student status and expensive booking fee entitled her to special treatment. She threatened to destroy the company's reputation online and file lawsuits if the crew didn't provide her with the extreme experience she demanded. Her complete disregard for safety became evident when she suggested that crew members should enter the water first to test whether the sharks were dangerous, The waters around Neptune Islands hosted some of the largest great white sharks on Earth, apex predators that had ruled these seas for over 400 million years. These magnificent hunters can reach lengths of over 20 feet and weights exceeding 4,000 pounds, with massive triangular heads housing rows of razor-sharp serrated teeth. Each tooth measures up to 3 inches in length and is designed to slice through flesh and bone. Great whites possess the most powerful bite force of any living creature, capable of exerting over 4,000 pounds per square inch of crushing press. The crew had successfully attracted multiple great white sharks using a carefully prepared chum mixture. Among the responding predators was a massive 18-foot female estimated to weigh over 4,000 pounds. The enormous shark displayed classic hunting behaviors, circling the boat with calculated precision, while investigating the steel diving cage. Before entering the water, Tara secretly loosened the connections on her diving regulator, planning to create a fake equipment malfunction that would justify exiting the protective cage. She believed she was clever enough to manipulate the situation to get the unrestricted shark access she felt entitled to. Once submerged in the protective cage, Tara immediately began signaling fake distress to the surface crew, pointing frantically at her sabotaged regulator. Captain Morrison initiated emergency procedures to bring her to the surface. But instead of ascending, Tara swam away from the cage toward the feeding sharks, believing her superior intelligence made her invulnerable. Her erratic swimming movements created the exact type of distressed prey behavior that triggers great white hunting instincts. The massive female great white detected Tara's panicked swimming immediately and abandoned the chum bait to investigate this new potential prey. The shark's assault was swift and devastating. Rising from the depths like a living torpedo, the great white struck Tara from below with tremendous force. Its massive jaws opened to reveal rows of gleaming serrated teeth. The impact drove Tara upward as the shark's jaws clamped down around her torso with bone-crushing press. The razor-sharp teeth sliced through her wetsuit and deep into her chest and abdomen. The crushing bite force shattered Tara's rib cage instantly, puncturing both lungs and severing major blood vessels throughout her torso. The shark's powerful jaw muscles continued applying press, while its head thrashed violently from side to side, the signature feeding behavior that allows great whites to tear away large chunks of flesh. The violent shaking motion severed Tara's body at the waist. I've seen the aftermath of shark attacks, and it's not something you easily forget. There's a primal horror in realizing how quickly life can be extinguished. One moment, a person is there, full of plans and expectations. The next, they're gone, reduced to, well, let's just say the sea can be unforgiving. I remember one case in particular involving a woman named Tara. Her story ended in seconds. Massive blood loss, traumatic shock, the complete destruction of vital organs. It was a brutal end, fueled, in part, by an arrogance that nature simply doesn't respect. Her belief that money and demands could somehow override the behavior of a natural predator proved fatally wrong. The investigation that followed revealed deliberate equipment sabotage, a violation of safety protocols. Stricter regulations were implemented for shark cage diving operations, but it was too late for Tara. Her family, displaying the same sense of entitlement that had led to her death, filed lawsuits against the tour company. Then there was Harold Thompson, out in Alabama. The sun beat down on his property that day, a property where the barking of dogs echoed from kennels scattered across 5 acres of red dirt. At 71, Hank, as everyone called him, moved slowly between the enclos. He carried water with the confidence that came from 2 decades of dog breeding. He and his wife, Martha, had built their operation from nothing, specializing in Rottweilers and German Shepherds. What had started as a hobby had grown into a modest business. 8 breeding females, 3 males, litters sold across the southeast. But age, I've noticed, has a way of making us all a little careless. In his younger days, Hank would never have entered a kennel alone, especially with breeding males during their territorial phases. He'd seen what those dogs could do, the power in their jaws, the speed of their attacks. But experience, or what he thought was experience, had bred overconfidence. The centerpiece of their operation was Brutus, a 130-pound Rottweiler whose massive frame made him their most sought-after stud. At 4 years old, he was in his prime, his bloodline tracing back to German working dogs. His offspring commanded premium prices from buyers seeking protection animals. Recently, though, Brutus had been showing increased aggression. A minor injury to his left rear leg had left him limping and irritable, causing him to snap at Martha when she tried to examine the wound. The veterinarian had prescribed pain medication, but the dog's temperament had grown increasingly unpredictable. Martha had expressed concerns about Hank working alone with Brutus, especially given the dog's recent mood changes. But Hank dismissed her worries with stubborn confidence. He'd raised Brutus from a puppy and believed their bond was unbreakable. On that March afternoon, Martha had driven into town for supplies, leaving Hank alone with the dogs. The kennels needed cleaning. Water bowls required filling. Work Hank had done thousands of times before. Brutus watched from his kennel as Hank approached, the dog's dark eyes tracking every movement with an intensity that should have served as a warning. The animal was panting heavily despite the shade, his injured leg causing him to shift uncomfortably. Pain has a way of making even docile animals unpredictable, and Brutus was far from docile. Hank unlocked the kennel gate and stepped inside, bucket in hand, his attention focused on the dirty water bowl in the corner. He'd performed this routine hundreds of times, but today Brutus was different. The dog's ears were pinned back, his tail held low, his massive body coiled with tension. As Hank bent down to clean the water bowl, his back turned to the dog, Brutus made his decision. There was no growling, no warning, just 130 pounds of muscle launching through the air with devastating force. The impact drove Hank face first into the concrete floor, his bucket clattering away as Brutus's jaws found their target. The dog's teeth sank deep into Hank's throat, crushing his windpipe and severing major blood vessels in a single, catastrophic bite. Hank's hands clawed desperately at the animal's massive head, but Brutus had locked on with predatory determination. The dog's powerful neck muscles allowed him to shake violently, tearing through tissue and bone with mechanical efficiency. Hank's screams were cut short by the damage to his throat, replaced by a wet, gurgling sound that grew weaker by the second. Blood pooled beneath his body as Brutus continued his attack, driven by instinct spread into his lineage for generations. The assault lasted less than 3 minutes, but the damage was irreversible. When Brutus finally released his grip, Hank lay motionless on the kennel floor, his life ebbing away in the Alabama heat. Martha returned home 2 hours later to find the property strangely quiet. She called out for Hank as she walked toward the kennels, but received no response. When she rounded the corner and saw Brutus standing guard over her husband's body, the full horror became clear. The dog's reaction to Martha's presence was immediate and threatening. He positioned himself between her and Hank's body, his lips pulled back in a snarl. Martha backed away slowly, dialing 911 from her truck. Sheriff's deputies arrived within 20 minutes, but Brutus refused to allow anyone near Hank's body. After consulting with animal control, the decision was made to shoot Brutus rather than risk additional casualties. The massive Rottweiler died with 3 bullets in his chest. The investigation concluded that Hank's death was a tragic accident caused by his failure to recognize warning signs of an aggressive, injured animal. The breeding operation was shut down, the remaining dogs relocated, and Martha was left to grieve both her husband and the animal that had been part of their family. Then I think of Sarah Miller, out near the Toklat River in Denali National Park, Alaska. It was September 3rd, 2013. By early afternoon, the wind had dropped and the landscape stood still, open and silent. From a distance, it looked calm, a place where nothing could happen quickly. But the quiet there was deceptive. Sarah Miller, 26, was an experienced backpacker from Anchorage. She was known for her... It's almost incomprehensible to me, the idea of facing the Denali wilderness alone. But that's what Sarah did. She trusted her skills more than gear. That week, she planned a 2-day loop near the Tlat River, perfectly timed to coincide with the caribou migration. It was a route where wolves were often seen trailing the herds. She carried bear spray, a GPS beacon, and enough food for 2 nights. Solo travel didn't intimidate her. She'd been doing it for years, documenting her routes for small hiking blogs. She had properly filed for the required Denali backcountry permits. Rangers later recalled that she'd asked about late-season wolf movements, but showed no concern when told sightings had increased near the river corridor. The wolves, they said, had been following caribou herds migrating south, and fresh tracks had been noted days earlier. To Sarah, it was just part of the environment, one she respected but didn't fear. Wolves in that region averaged between 70 and 100 pounds. Built for endurance and speed, capable of covering 40 miles in a day, their jaws delivered a bite force of nearly 400 pounds per square inch, strong enough to crush bone. They rarely approached people living on caribou, hares, and ground squirrels. But when prey grew scarce or human scent carried traces of food, curiosity sometimes lingered. That week, rangers had posted advisories near trailheads, noting that several hikers reported wolves trailing them at a distance. Sarah had likely read those postings when she signed out, though no record showed she changed her route. Her confidence in her precautions was understandable. Statistically, Denali's wolves avoided confrontation. Around 4 p.m., A passing tourist group in a vehicle on the park road spotted a lone figure standing on a gravel bar below the ridge. The hiker waved, later confirmed by clothing and timing to be Sarah, before continuing upstream toward the area where her camp was located. She reached her final GPS coordinate sometime before 4:45 p.m. The last photos on her recovered camera showed wide shots of the river valley and a small group of wolves following a caribou herd in the mid-distance. Tracks found later indicated she moved off the main gravel bar toward higher ground, likely planning to cut inland. The first sign of struggle began about half a mile from her tent. Her GPS unit recorded erratic movement, rapid looping, then a sudden stop. Investigators reconstructed what happened next through physical evidence and predator behavior analysis. The wolves had diverted toward her position once the herd passed out of sight. Sarah likely saw them at a distance, as she deployed her bear spray once. Residue was detected on nearby vegetation. Wind readings that afternoon showed a westward shift, causing partial blowback of the spray mist. It worked briefly, driving the wolves about 20 feet back before the cloud dispersed. They began to circle again, emboldened by the fading chemical scent. One flank of the group approached from behind, following her retreat up a shallow embankment. Handprints pressed deep into the soil showed she climbed in haste. Blood marks began at the top of the slope. One wolf had likely lunged first, grabbing her backpack or arm. The straps were torn clean through, consistent with a pulling force rather than a cut. A second wolf joined, aiming lower, its bite breaking the skin along her thigh. She tried to fight back. The spray canister lay spent beside her pack, but the group coordinated, one attacking from the rear, the others darting forward. The ground at the site was churned with soil and hair, suggesting several minutes of movement before she was forced down. Analysis of tissue marks later revealed crushing bites to the neck and shoulder consistent with a killing grip, the kind wolves used to suffocate large prey. Her jacket was shredded, and the torn sleeve, recovered 20 feet away, still held fragments of skin and fabric. Search efforts began that night, with both ground crews and a helicopter dispatched after rangers noted her vehicle unmoved. The aircraft spotted a disturbed patch of gravel near the Tlat Channel the next morning. Sarah's body lay partially covered by soil and debris, her left arm missing, likely carried off by scavengers after the attack. They collected the camera and other items for analysis, and later confirmed through timestamps that her final photograph was taken just 6 minutes before the estimated time of death. The park temporarily closed multiple backcountry zones along the migration corridor. Genetic sampling confirmed the wolves belonged to the Tollet pack. Investigators determined the attack began as a predatory test or prey proxy response that escalated fatally, but with no repeated approach or food-seeking behavior observed, no removals were ordered. At a private debrief, rangers explained the findings to Sarah's parents, who later issued a short statement urging that the park not punish what it protects. It was April 14, 2018, when Monica Barrett arrived at Everglades National Park in Florida, one of the largest tropical wilderness areas in the United States. The vast wetland ecosystem stretched across 1.5 million acres of sawgrass marshes and shallow waterways that served as home to some of North America's most dangerous predators. The park's intricate network of channels created the perfect habitat for massive American alligators. Monica Barrett, a 44-year-old divorce attorney from Miami, had booked a solo kayak tour to clear her head after a difficult custody case. Known for her aggressive courtroom tactics and confrontational personality, she had built her legal career on intimidating opponents and refusing to back down from any challenge. Her reputation for getting her way through sheer force of will had created a dangerous sense of entitlement. Tommy Rodriguez, a 52-year-old tour guide with over 20 years of experience, had immediately recognized Monica as a problematic client during the morning safety briefing. She had interrupted his presentation. There are moments when nature's beauty masks a brutal reality. I remember reading about a woman named Monica who visited a national park during alligator nesting season. She reportedly boasted about her legal expertise, dismissing safety advice from a park ranger and a tour guide. She even threatened lawsuits when they tried to enforce basic safety protocols. It seems she believed her rights as a taxpayer entitled her to explore any area, regardless of the danger. The tour guide, Tommy, repeatedly warned everyone to stay within designated channels because it was active alligator nesting season. The park had warning signs posted around known nesting sites where territorial males were guarding their offspring. But Monica, growing increasingly belligerent, accused Tommy of limiting her constitutional rights. She broke away from the group and paddled her kayak toward a restricted lagoon, ignoring the multiple warning signs. She wanted to investigate some wildlife activity. That lagoon was a primary nesting area for a massive 12-foot bull alligator, an 800-pound reptile that had been actively defending his territory for 3 weeks, already driving off smaller males. Monica's kayak triggered its most aggressive instincts. The alligator detected the vibrations from her paddle strokes almost immediately. It had been resting motionless beneath the surface, camouflaged among the vegetation. The attack was swift. The alligator launched itself from the water, its jaws clamping down on the front of Monica's kayak. The impact capsized her, throwing her into the murky water directly in front of the enraged reptile. As she struggled, disoriented and panicked, the alligator identified her as a threat. Its jaws found purchase on her torso, teeth puncturing through her life jacket, deep into her chest and abdomen. The crushing bite shattered ribs instantly, puncturing lungs and severing major blood vessels. Then came the death roll, the alligator's signature killing technique. It spun violently, disorienting its prey and causing massive internal trauma. The reptile rotated rapidly in the water, spinning Monica's body while maintaining its grip. The violent rotation tore muscles and caused catastrophic internal injuries. The death roll continued for over a minute. Her punctured lungs filled with water, and the crushing press prevented her from breathing. Her shattered ribs ground against each other, causing additional internal bleeding. The combination of massive trauma, drowning, and blood loss proved fatal within minutes. Monica's struggles ceased as the alligator continued its death roll. The reptile eventually released her lifeless body, which floated to the surface. Tommy radioed for help, but rescue teams couldn't reach the remote lagoon in time. It was May 14th, 2017. On that same day, in the ancient mountains of Great Smoky Mountains National Park, under golden sunlight filtering through the trees, Sarah Johnson, a 29-year-old nurse from Atlanta, was hiking with her fiancé, Tom. They were exploring the park's trails, taking photos to celebrate their engagement. Sarah loved nature photography and always carried her camera. Her medical background gave her practical knowledge of emergencies, but her experience with dangerous wildlife was limited. She'd been hiking throughout the Southeast for years, gaining confidence and wilderness skills. These mountain getaways were essential stress relief from her demanding job at a busy trauma center. That afternoon, Sarah and Tom were hiking through a remote alpine meadow when they saw something extraordinary. 2 black bear cubs playing in the tall grass, their mother nowhere in sight. Sarah knew this was a once-in-a-lifetime photo opportunity. It's a hard lesson, learned in the most brutal way imaginable. A mother bear protecting her cubs is an almost unstoppable force. Their protective instincts can turn a seemingly harmless encounter into a deadly confrontation in seconds. And Sarah, full of excitement, never saw it coming. Black bears, though common in North America, become exponentially more aggressive when they have cubs. A mother bear will attack without warning, seeing any human presence near her young as a mortal threat. They are incredibly strong and fast, capable of running up to 30 miles per hour through dense forest. Sarah had been photographing the adorable cubs, believing she was at a safe distance. Tom repeatedly urged her to move away, but she was convinced the mother wasn't nearby. The cubs continued to play, wrestling in the meadow grass, and Sarah documented every move for nearly 10 minutes, capturing dozens of images. Her fatal mistake was positioning herself between the cubs and their natural escape route to the forest. As she moved for a better angle, she unknowingly blocked their path to safety. This triggered the mother bear's protective instincts. She had been watching from the tree line. The charge was swift and terrifying. The 200-pound female covered the distance in seconds, her powerful legs propelling her massive frame with surprising speed. Her fury was focused entirely on eliminating the perceived threat. Sarah tried to retreat, but her foot caught on a fallen log, and she tumbled backward, still clutching her camera. The mother bear reached her before she could regain her footing, striking her with bone-crushing force. Her massive paw connected with Sarah's back, razor-sharp claws raking across her spine and shoulders, the impact shattering several ribs. Her camera flew from her grip as the bear's weight pinned her to the ground. Her attempts to call for help were silenced by the crushing prise on her chest. The mother bear's powerful jaws clamped down on Sarah's neck, the crushing bite force fracturing vertebrae and severing vital arteries. Within minutes, Sarah's movement ceased. The protective mother remained near her body for several more minutes, ensuring the threat was neutralized, before gathering her cubs and disappearing into the dense forest. Park rangers arrived over an hour later in response to Tom's emergency call, but Sarah was already dead from massive trauma. The bear family was tracked but left undisturbed as wildlife officials determined the mother had been acting within normal protective behavioral patterns when defending her young. Sarah's death devastated the hiking community and prompted enhanced educational programs about wildlife safety and proper distance protocols. Her family established a foundation promoting wilderness safety education, ensuring her passion for conservation would continue through enhanced protection for both wildlife and outdoor enthusiasts.